and welcome to Solve. This is SaaSOps Live virtual event, episode 33. So we have recorded 33 of these Friday afternoon meetings. We have had many more unofficial ones, and we've had some Solve tanks in between. But today we are joined by our longtime friend and colleague, Chris Walker. So Chris might be a failed 72-ounce steak eater, but he's a very accomplished IT and SaaS ops and security professional. And today he is here to talk to us about how we can protect our SaaS. So thank you very much, Chris, for joining us this afternoon and telling us how we can, in SaaSOps, use but maintain security of all of our tools.
Thank you so much, Colin. And hey, everybody. It's Chris Walker, your security doctor here to protect your SaaS. I am actually a SecOps advisory solution consultant, and I'm going to be talking through a couple of different security use cases, principles, and then asking some good questions around how you're leveraging your security tools today. First and foremost, for those who don't know me, I was a former Better Clouder. I used to work for Better Cloud. Miss everyone here on the team, and it's an absolute honor to be able to be part of this conversation here today. First and foremost, we'll get all the fun things out of the way. It was just my birthday, so shout out to my Geminis. If there's any Geminis out there, really appreciate you. You guys are taking one for the team. Well, we're really two people. A little bit of background, just to kind of level set who I am and where I came from. I graduated from Stevenson University with a computer information science degree and went back to major in networking because I love to geek out and just try and break things and figure out how they work. Bilingual as well. My mother's actually from Bolivia. So I've learned through her yelling at me and telling me things that are right and wrong. I've picked up the Spanish trait. So I'm able to read and write and also speak. So I've actually traveled to Bolivia a couple of times, almost every other year since I was 2 years old. So fun fact. I was also IT help desk manager. So I managed my own help desk and security operations center teams for several years at 2 employers ago. So I kind of worked my ranks through just being an IT admin, sweeping floors, building computers, really anything I can get my hands on, all the way up to strategic project management, incident handling, threat hunting, and then obviously protecting our SaaS. And now we can see step 4 here, SecOps consultant. That's currently what I do now. So I'm an advisory solution consultant, prescribing different methodologies and different technologies to orchestrate that through SOAR case management and enterprise visibility. I developed an Azure integration that you might have heard of through the grapevine. And I also survived my own NIST 800-171 audit, which took a year and change to go through. That was not fun. Did a lot of the documentation and controls and mapping all of my business continuity plans and processes and everything in between. So doing that as a one-stop shop was certainly a learning experience that I'm happy to share as we go through today's discussion. And I raise 3 chickens. So if you're looking for a chicken farm or a chicken tender, I got you. I'm a chicken defender and a tender. So we'll defend the SaaS. We'll provide some protein, some eggs, and some good laughs, but let's go ahead and get right into it. So first and foremost, I want to level set on what security operations is, what it's all about, how you're not just protecting your SaaS, you're really protecting your assets. And when we think about assets, I think about it as protecting my home, right? Security cameras are there to do one thing. My garage door opener is there to do one thing, open and close, but there's always gaps, there's inefficiencies, there's areas that I don't have eyes on all the time. And so I want to talk to everyone here candidly about how you're protecting your environments, what kind of tools, processes, procedures you have in place. And then we'll just, have an open and engaging conversation around different security principles that I think would be really important to start putting in place, if not already, just implementing better practices that really tie back to more of a zero trust architecture and how that really maps back to security operations. So typically what I hear from a lot of customers, clients, people that I've talked to throughout my tenure, 35 years young, going strong, I talk to a lot of different companies, customers, individuals like yourself. And I always ask, what hurts? What hurts the most when you're going through security audits or just trying to assess and digress a complete audit inventory of your entire space? And typically this is the response I get. Everything's fine. We're good. We don't need what you're selling. We don't need what you're presenting. I'm doing well. But deep down inside, there's much more than meets the eye. And we know that behind the plumbing, something's leaking. And that's typically data, right? Data leakage, compromised accounts, addressing account takeovers, because we've seen this in the news now so many times, it continues to happen. And so when I think about security, I think about super troopers. I like to kind of take this approach because we're constantly watching, but security can actually be really fun. It really can be. And so a couple of house rules really quickly: ask any and all questions. I'm going to be going through just a couple of really high level slides, nothing fancy here. I want this to be super engaging. Let's geek out. Let's have fun. Let's have a conversation. And let's talk about some different areas that you're leveraging security operations, or just security in general, right? Your SIM tools, vulnerability scanners, compliance assessments, trying to pass the audit, pass with flying colors, hopefully, and get to that next level of certification. And of course, recognition, because that's really why we're here. It's the recognition of our brand, our industry, and of course, what we're bringing to the table from the security perspective. So a couple of areas that I'm going to be covering today. First and foremost, we'll be talking through some just high-level introductory SIM technologies, leveraging these tools, what they do, and how we can start to orchestrate that through SOAR components. I'll ask a couple of questions there before we get into that kind of module. And then we're going to go into vulnerabilities response. So just kind of talking around how you're leveraging vulnerability scanners, if at all. We're just kind of curious to see what you guys are using out there. And so we can kind of get a better understanding of what does your landscape look like? How do you tend to those exposures, those CVEs, common vulnerability exposures, and how do you actually then respond to them, right? And mitigate them and contain them within your space. Because there's a lot of different processes, a lot of hands on keyboards and click fatigue and trying to figure out who's doing what. And it's almost like a Russian roulette at this point. We're just trying to figure out who's going where, who's doing what, and who do I need to poke and prod and call on the walkie-talkie to execute this patch deployment, or make sure that my change advisory board groups are in line with this deployment phase for these, 0-day vulnerabilities that just came out, and Patch Tuesday's right around the corner. What are we doing about it, right? Where's the mean time to remediation, and how fast are we responding? So a couple of things to keep in mind before we get into not just the house rules, right? We're having fun. But keep an open mind about security as this pillar. And back to my initial anecdote of, it's your house. You're protecting your house, the entities, the investments, the data, the PII, right? Everything in your house, you don't want that stuff exposed. I don't. I want my stuff protected, right? I want to protect my SaaS, right? And so in order to do that, we have to come up with a battle plan. And I wanted to bring this up because it's something I've been actually using as a really great just visual representation of my battle plan from a security operations perspective from this lens. Home Alone fans, anybody? Me? Just me? Probably everybody. Love Home Alone. It's the greatest movie ever. I watch it like regularly. I think it's the #1 movie that comes up on my streaming accounts. It's that, and I think there's a couple others, but it's such a powerful movie. It talks about family. It talks about your people. It talks about a process, and it also talks about different technologies. If you think about it, right? Kevin McAllister came up with a battle plan. This is how I'm going to protect my house, so that these robbers, right, these hijackers, these attackers don't come in and take my stuff that I've worked very hard for. I built out my Cmdb, right? I built out all these different endpoints. I configured these consoles. I don't want someone to come in here and completely breach all the work that I've done. So how do I cover my bases? How do I cover my assets? And so that's today's conversation, is how we protect the SaaS and beyond, because it's not just cloud service providers that we're looking to protect. We're also looking to protect anything else we might not see within the ecosystem in that space. So everyone's still with me? We're still on the ship? Cool. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get right into the PowerPoint presentation. Again, it's just going to be a few slides. Don't like to be slide heavy here, but I do want to just kind of level set, and then we'll start opening up the conversations here. So I'm going to go ahead and share out my other screen here. All right. Put this in presentation mode, and we are sharing. Okay. And I'm not muted. We can still hear me, Colin? Okay. Yeah. We can still hear me.
Yep.
Okay.
I still hear you.
All right. Perfect. So I wanted to go ahead and again showcase the kind of starting point. I think we've all seen this. We've all heard or felt some type of fatigue when it comes to these different point tool solutions. And the problem is we look at all of these different solutions and we pour money into them. We're investing into all these different things that are going to promise all these incredible things. And they do these things, right? So the technology we know works. The problem doesn't lie there. It's where these tools are talking to each other. Where are the handshakes? Where are the bidirectional synchronizations? And how are we actually adhering to not only common security practices, but the principles, the methodologies, and also how we're orchestrating the response to all of these tools and making sure that all the key stakeholders know, hey, this dependency on our HR server has been impacted by a vulnerability, and we have a security incident breach that has just identified the operations, customers, and development teams are also going to be impacted by this vulnerability, which means we need to shut down these virtual machines. And also this is impacting a load balancer, right? So it's impacting all these things, but we don't know that. Why? Because a lot of these things are siloed. They're just in a disparity kind of world of misfit tools. And now that creates a lot of confusion, no trust, no transparency, right? Because we don't know what we can't see. So really, when it comes to addressing those type of exposures, SaaS tools live in the cloud. And the cloud is an incredible area because it's really easy to use. It's completely accessible from any device now, right? Even from your Apple Watch, you can do a lot of things on your watch. The problem with that is it's introduced a lot of vulnerabilities, right? Malware, phishing attacks, potential exposures of client data. How do we appropriate SaaS security tools to not only secure those applications, but also secure the entities and the users and the data that's behind that? And how do we drive best security practice measures? That's a hard question to ask as well as answer, but it is my first poll question. And I'd like to just put this here in the chat here really quickly, if I can find the chat. But I'll just ask the question and everyone, oh, here's the chat here. But I would love to, thanks for the comments here, Andy. But I would love to ask this question here. And the question here is, do you have a SOC team in your org? And we'll just kind of do a round robin. Again, you don't have to get into the details, but I would just like to kind of go around the horn. We'll start with Steve. And just curious, if you have a security operations team, if that's of concern, if that's even prevalent or relatable, not SOC team, swag is great. Yeah. But yeah, we'll just go around the horn. I'd just love to hear it from the perspective of what you do. If you do have a SOC team, you can put it in the chat or go off mute. So Steve, nope. Also no. Okay. Okay. Nope. Nope. Jesse,
yeah, I think there's a theme here, Chris.
I see a theme. So yeah, but it's complex. We're a big, okay. Okay. Andy, I want to unpack that just a little bit. So it's big, it's complex. What do you mean by that? You can unpack it just a little bit, not all the way. Just curious on what you mean by it's like big, complex.
Only that we're a big organization, so I'm fairly far from security in general. I know that we have InfoSec teams, they have SOC within that. There are other people who do different kinds of security and trying to like. So yes, we have people who focus on this area. How that's structured, no, not as much as they ought to.
Yeah, it coming from a large organization as well, those teams seem to be very fragmented and specific to a specific part, whether it's end user devices or servers, other applications. Yeah, it's there, but as Andy said, ours can be complex.
Yeah. So let's ask this question here. If there is a vulnerability or some type of incident that is breaching a policy, an internal policy, is there some type of, at least at a high level, some type of business process that follows how that issue is going to be mitigated or contained within the actual organization based on those tools?
I'm going to guess that everybody is going to say yes, because everybody would have confirmed to their clients that yes, they have something like that in place, where in practice there might not be something
totally
that's used very often. And I've heard from lots of other companies that have something on paper, but it's not regularly tested.
Right. +1 to Colin. Yep. Haram, what is up, my friend?
Hey, Chris.
How's it going? It's been a while.
It has been a good minute. Thank you for this presentation. It's pretty killer.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you want to absolutely unpack again, total open discussion, but of course with full disclosure of, all of our entities and our employers. So making sure we're practicing safe security measures there. But yeah, if you want to unpack a little bit, that'd be great. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, can do. Yeah, so my organization, Workiva, does have a pretty large org. I mean, we are a bigger organization to some, and I guess the word bigger is relative.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a pretty big dedicated security team. Our security team takes the approach more so of, security doesn't really start and end with like InfoSec or security ops. It starts and ends with every employee that's a part of the organization. And so the approach that they take is that they have routine trainings required, not optional, trainings throughout the entire organization for every person. And they're open with how you can reach and communicate with them with different workflows. And we use Slack, so different workflows in their public support rooms. So if there's even a question or doubt about some security issue, you can always email them or reach out and start a review with them, and they'll create incident rooms just to go over and review what that might be. So they're very honest and open with what might be happening, and they're always on top of making sure employees are trained in the best practices for cloud security, especially since we operate a lot in the cloud, and a lot of organizations operate in the cloud nowadays. So they are on top of whatever each best practice may be, especially if it's best practices in GCPs or AWS, especially for employees that have access to those types of cloud spaces.
Yeah, I think that's exactly spot on. And I appreciate you kind of unpacking and going through just that overall synopsis of how you're leveraging different security practices, different procedures internally, talking through, security awareness training. That's definitely an area I'm always concerned of, but also happy to hear that most organizations are really starting to invest more security training, not just time, but efforts to really educate us on why security is a first mindset whenever we're either purchasing, procuring, implementing, deploying, and even maintaining said solution. We have to think about security, right? Access controls, roles, permissions. Is it scoped? Is it not scoped? Can I only see this? Are other users able to see what I see based on the records or what's been recorded in this point solution tool or platform? So finding a solution that fits everything across the board is obviously the holy grail. And I think that's one of the major challenges with SaaS security is sometimes we're only targeting a specific set of cloud applications. Often those are from, within the same brand or the same suite, right? So G Suite, right? You have your Googles of the world, your Microsofts of the world, right? So we're only looking at OneDrive. We're only looking at Microsoft Teams collaboration, but we're not looking at all these other entities. So being able to connect all the dots, that's what gives us the advantage against a hacker who's on the cutting edge always. They're always looking for vulnerabilities, for a loophole, for a port that's just open. And I'll just invite myself in. There's a welcome mat right there. I might as well walk in and take what I need, and nothing's going to happen from that because I'm going to do this undetected because this particular area wasn't protected for whatever reason. So the goal of how we actually find the detection is the first component, but being able to get away from what we're seeing here on the screen, right? This disoriented, disconnected kind of ecosystem. There's too many hands here. There's too many arrows. And so what I wanted to also talk to you, everyone here about today was zero trust architecture. It's another big topic that's been coming up on a lot of my conversations and calls. And I think this is another area where I'd also like to ask the question on if anyone else has also been hearing or looking to at least get into the zero architecture space or framework. We can just put it in the chat, just say yes or no if you've heard it or seen it or been talking about it. Just curious to see if this is something you're either looking to implement based off of CISA or some other type of, there's so many different security reports out there around zero architecture. Steve Main's using it for some stuff. Okay. Steve, what are you, oh, Barracuda. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so instead of using VPN to just widely open someone into our network, we're looking at zero trust networking through Barracuda, where they have an application that is then uses Google as their identity provider, verifies who they are. They're given applications that give them specific access to certain websites that are, let's say it's a marketing install like Eloqua, for example.
Yeah.
It's locked down to the IP address of our Barracuda endpoint. And so basically there's that, instead of being wide open and we go, hey, anybody from our office IP address is allowed to access this because we trust everyone inside our office. It then restricts it down to the actual identity of the person that's now being trusted, not just you're coming from an office. We trust you, because that's where the bad players are going to be. They're going to hack and pretend to be inside your network as well.
Exactly. Yep. No, that's a great effort and a great use case there as well. It's right, establishing corporate identity and making sure that they have the right entitlements and that they're able to access the point solution or the point tool based on a location, right? That's a pretty big effort. Now, I wanted to put this up here on the screen here so you can see we have our users, right? We have all these different devices and technologies that we can use, right? Our mobile devices, email, web browsing, and then of course, just standard communication. Those all get siloed into different endpoints and devices and different, right, mobile device management policies and how we enforce them. And of course, how we then make sure that those users have access to what they need to be successful, right, and productive, because we don't want to hinder their productivity. So there's always a fine line of productivity and security, because we want to lock it all down. Unfortunately, we also want to make it super easy and much, a very like easy experience for the client or the end user, so that they actually adopt said technology. If we lock everything down, it becomes a conversation that sometimes isn't always great. And that's an area I've also seen start to really surface more and more as I talk through security operations, right? How much is too much? Well, I think it's never enough. I think we should always be locking down. Multi-factor, I had a huge, I know Colin's big in multi-factor world. I can't stress that enough. It is just an absolute necessity. I mean, everything should have multi-factor. There should be no question, rhyme or reason as to why we need to have multi-factor authentication, and really try to get to that zero trust architecture. So that level of effort, when I was working at a previous employer, it required, myself and another colleague of mine to really orchestrate not just the deployment and the planning, but also the benefits and the value we were going to get from said, deployment of multi-factor authentication throughout the entire space of our organization. So I've broken this down by level of effort by using some little icons here, little wrenches. Now, of course, this is just more of just a general consensus of how I thought the effort went. Wasn't too bad in my org. I had about 5,000 employees. So we were able to deploy multi-factor for the most part pretty seamlessly within 2 weeks. Again, we had probably about 1.5 years worth of planning. So it wasn't just overnight, but it did take some time. The second area that we went into when we talked about endpoints and devices, right? Mobile device management, protection, right? Your IDS, IPS tools, asset inventory, understanding the services that are impacted, but also those REST APIs that you're using. How secure are they? What are the limitations? What are the scoped controls and access roles that are required to make those calls? And then, of course, being able to audit and understand what are these services actually doing? What do they have access to? What can they execute? So these are questions to start talking about internally, right? Whether you're using zero trust architecture or not, this is a great base level set. And feel free to look it up. CISA has a great document. It's very long and lengthy, but it's a great document to at least further educate and guide your business, your organization to be security first mindset in everything, not just in your Cmdb, not just in these point tool solutions, but really whenever you're procuring and implementing these tools, take a look at that document. There's some really good definitions and summaries and guidelines to help you start curating better security conversations internally. And last but not least, this is probably the biggest effort, right? A service aware Cmdb, right? The one source of truth, the one ring to rule them all, the thing that can talk, see, and deliver the dependencies and how everything is mapped back to the source and to all the other things that we'd be talking to. So segmentation, monitoring, private, public, multi-SaaS tenants, on-prem, configuration, assessments, compliance, and governance. Everything we're seeing here is about today's topic, protecting your SaaS. Everything is security focused. Everything has security components tied back to these solutions. So again, this is just a visual representation. I wanted to showcase this because I think it's not only important, but it's really prevalent, and it's up to us as SaaS leaders to make sure that we are talking about this and we're bringing it up into tabletop conversations, and we're setting the table, eating the full 72-ounce steak and having room for dessert to say, there's more we can do here. We can improve the security process. We can mature our security posture, and we can start to gain enterprise visibility by leveraging a system of action. And when we talk about a system of action, what we're using here is we're using the data we're harnessing from the tools, right? All the endpoint solutions that we've purchased, whether they're a scanner or monitoring some event or the health of our network, and they're doing some packet filtration where we're looking at different anomalies, failed user login attempts or compromised accounts, or someone is mass downloading a bunch of information, they're trying to exfiltrate it to another employer. We've seen these things. We've done these things. This is something we rinse and repeat all day long. There are better ways to correlate and detect that information when you start looking at SOAR solutions. And so that's going to be my next question as part of today's topic. Anyone know, for two questions, actually. First and foremost, do we know what a SOAR is? An SOAR? You can put that in the chat. And the second question is, if we know what a SOAR is anyone using a security orchestrated automated remediation tool at this time? And you don't have to say the name of the SOAR, by the way, but.
Yeah, we've got some notes coming in. I'm going to be a nope on that too, but I need to now Google what that is and rethink.
That's totally fine. So there's a couple of key players out there in terms of SOAR capabilities. SOAR solutions, they use a combination of a couple of things. First and foremost, there's a lot of machine learning that happens on the back end. Machine learning with predictive intelligence. And predictive intelligence essentially allows you to train your solutions to do and detect a lot of historical data and produce confidence scores. So I basically could say, I'm confident that Colin can protect these 5 areas that I have concerns on, and he knows how to patch these vulnerabilities because he has that level of expertise. Based on the historical data, I can see he's closed 300 vulnerabilities through patch deployment. And all those vulnerabilities are mapping back to this specific vulnerability. So the confidence I have now is a 95% confidence score, automatically assigned to Colin, because Colin's not only going to get it done, he's going to get it done right and very fast. And so we can put some intelligence behind not only the human, but also the machine. So it's a combination of the two on how we diversify the data, how we classify it through clustering, and then how we predictively tell the human, right, the person behind the monitor and the screen and the mouse, where to go to now eliminate the threat, whether that's through incident response, vulnerability management, or some other type of third-party solution. So this in turn then allows you to do things like workflows, and we're all familiar with workflows. The workflows work for us. They help us automate and save time, efforts, and eliminate human inconsistencies and errors. This is also prevalent when we talk about security. And so when we bring in those sources, our clients, those agents, whether they're on-prem or in the cloud, we can leverage security operations to now see the vulnerabilities, to know the specific playbooks or workflows that are going to orchestrate and kick off those series of actions, right? The chain of pain or the chain of command. That chain of command is going to help me protect my house because all my stakeholders, my house members, know what needs to be protected. They know their role, they know their responsibility, and they know exactly what they need to do based on the analytics. And because we're still talking about that serviceware Cmdb and we want to centralize everything in our house. And I love what you said here, Andy. I think that this is the key. So one of the key call outs here, Andy Yates just mentioned in the chat, he said, I think this is a key point of your house analogy. You want to secure it, but you also want to live in it. You do. I want to live in a healthy environment all day long. I hate doing laundry, but I want to live in a healthy, clean environment. I have to do the laundry and I have to do it in a very kind of methodical way versus just throwing it in the closet and hope it goes away at some point. The problem with that is, is there a question?
Chris, to add to that, you also don't want to keep verifying who you are.
Yes.
If you're sitting on the sofa, you don't want your mum or your dad to keep walking up saying, who are you? What are you doing?
Who are you? Yeah.
It's like, I just did Okta 15 minutes ago. Don't make me do it again.
Yeah. It's like 10-second Tom. I think it was from 50 First Dates. Hey, I'm Tom. 10 seconds later. hey, I'm Tom. It's like, okay, like we already know you're Tom, but sometimes you have to continue to verify yourself. And because we have to do that, that's added more time, more frustration. And now we're not getting to the source of the problem to triage and isolate this issue. So it's a great analogy. And so when we start to bring everything in together into fruition and we have everything set up on the dinner table, we can start to understand how we now take that service aware Cmdb. We know the dependencies, we know how it maps our house, how it creates that digital blueprint. More so now we know what the tools are going to do based on what we know, because I can't predict what I can't see. That's just a common fact. But now I can take those source solutions, that system of action, to go orchestrate my entire enterprise visibility, which means I have way more value add, way more time to focus on strategic initiatives and goals, but also be able to say, hey, I now have a solution in place that adheres to this type of compliance effort, right? It maps to NIST 800-61 or FedRAMP or HIPAA or GDPR. And everything is, again, it's future-proofing your not only role, but your entire organization's solutions and how you actually comprehend and append some of this information into these different assets. So it's something we all know, we all practice and breathe and kind of drink our own champagne, in some respect. But it's so important to just make sure we identify and prioritize how we remediate and mitigate some of these efforts around the security architecture. So this example here is just, again, it's really high level, but it's just to give you kind of, again, that battle plan to really understand how we bring all these different data sets into that perspective. The last slide I'm going to show here, and then I'll stop sharing my screen. Again, it just kind of speaks candidly about everything we were talking about. Bringing in all your technology, bringing in all your tools, right? Single architecture, single data model, service-aware Cmdb, using intelligence, using machine learning. And then, of course, taking that power that we've harnessed and powering our house to now secure all the different windows and doors and locks and things that we're not seeing, right? In the air ducts and in the ventilation systems and our HVAC, right? How do we protect all these things that we're not seeing? So there's ways to connect this information. And it's a matter of starting to have the conversation and also start having more of a security first mindset whenever you're actually going through and implementing some of these different tools and technologies. And so one of the other questions I wanted to ask here really quickly as well, for everyone who's still on the call, and it looks like I went off air for some reason. One of the other questions I wanted to ask here for everyone on the call was, just in terms of tools that may or may not be leveraged, would be curious to see if you are using a tool. Let's start with SIM tools. So if anyone's using a SIM tool, feel free to just call that out. Would love to just kind of hear what SIM technologies you might be using, right? Could be a Splunk, a Logarithm, an IBM QRadar. If you want to say that, that's fine. If not, that's fine as well. Just curious to see what tools out there that my colleagues have been using. I'm actually using right now my own test Splunk environment. So that's kind of one of the most popular ones I've been using and testing through. Andy's blanked on the name, so we'll come back to you, Andy.
I'll probably say some of us in large organizations or departments that have got specific tasks, we may not have visibility or knowledge or responsibility for those tools, but I'm sure in large organizations or in a lot of organizations they are in use. I'm gonna have to get you to come back on air.
I know. I would love to be back. I don't know why you can't see my beautiful face.
It's not worked.
It is not.
You have to go direct.
Us. I'm just off air. I'm in the cloud. You can't see me though. I'm in your routers right now.
We just hear the voice. You won't be on the video.
Yeah. Small orgs. We use the bad guys to find our holes and then patch them. I love. That's funny. Sumo Logic. Yeah, that's a great one too. Sumo Logic, great SIM tool. What about vulnerability scanners? Anyone using or know if you use a vulnerability scanner to?
Tenable
Tenable
is used in organizations that I'm aware of, and is very good.
Yeah, Tenable's a good one. Aqua, I saw Andy posted Aqua plus Tenable. Yep.
Twitter Twitter is also a very good vulnerability tool. If you follow the right people, or you'll get.
That is true. I mean, that's how I got my PS5. So
I think probably a lot of people found out about Log4j because of their Google News feed.
Yeah, and that's a great kind of transitional point, right? Log4j, although it is still a major crisis, and it's slowly becoming more weaponized as we speak right now. They're still finding more exposures and more insecurities and other application tools. It's an interesting area, because all of a sudden a lot of light bulbs went on that, okay, security is a thing. I have to do something about it, but how do I actually go through and query this information from what tool sets, and how do I present or represent this information visually to sell it internally to my business leaders, right? To convince them that this is a thing. I need security in my life. And it's a difficult conversation to have. Now, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Log4j happens, all of a sudden, oh, I need security tools because I need to protect myself from Log4j. Well, it's not just Log4j. We've had so many breaches, right? We think about the Target breach of 13 or 14. We still haven't learned from that, by the way. I mean, Target.
Credit card scanners, wasn't it? Credit card scanners. Tills. There were ATM cash registers they went through.
Yep. And you know the full story of the Target breach, right? How it was a third-party HVAC vendor from Pennsylvania, and it was his actual computer that got compromised from a phishing scam attack. They compromised his machine, right? His corporate machine, his asset. They got into it, compromised his accounts, then were able to go through one of the, I guess, HVAC tools that was being used with Target. Target didn't respond to all the alerts and fire alarms and smoke detectors that went off. And guess what? Bunch of PII went out the door just like that. And I mean, in a matter of mere minutes.
Interesting to hear that was started with a phishing attack, because wasn't that how Sony got compromised as well? Was through compromised admin credentials.
Correct. Yep. It's all about account takeovers are probably one of the most prevalent methods when it comes to like adversarial behaviors. It's probably the most popular method and use attack pattern to gain unauthorized access to some type of asset or entity or endpoint. There are obviously so many different types of adversarial techniques, tactics, and procedures, right? Without getting too far into the weeds of like MITRE. I'm curious if anyone on the call has used or leveraged or talked about MITRE attack framework, or using any of those type of threat intelligence feed sources or technologies to kind of map out the detection coverages and things like that. Anyone on the call using that besides me?
I did want to ask Chris,
sure.
If obviously a lot of these tools require budget management, investment, etc. They have overhead, and obviously the Target is a perfect example of there were alerts, but they probably had alert fatigue, ignored them, and then there was a problem. If you had limited resources, budget, or needed to start somewhere, as in our little discussions, most of the compromises have come from compromised end users. Would you say that the best investment is in security tools to mitigate and stop phishing? Making sure your SPF and your DKIM and your DMARC is set up correctly, and enabling, if you're on Gmail, Google Workspace, their own internal tools, having an MFA rollout, investing in Titan security keys or the YubiKeys.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question to bring up. And it's something that I have come up across a lot of some of my bigger opportunities when talking through the full end-to-end lifecycle management of security, and just understanding not just cloud security budget, but physical security as well, right? Because we have a lot of people getting in and out of doors, right? Their security badges, their cameras, that's another area that we're starting to look into. But really, it comes down to the cost to incur. It's really going to be charged back to probably a specific project or series of projects and departments, right? Because you kind of start to kind of bucket and prioritize, like, okay, well, my data loss prevention tool, we'll put that for the legal team because they have most of the data, and there's definitely a lot of things in there. So we've allocated maybe 50,000 for this, right? versus my HR teams, my finance teams. There'll probably be another bucket, since they're their own business unit, that's going to incur costs because they have sensitive files, right? PII based on our employees and compensation and salaries, et cetera. So it is a very large undertaking, Colin, when you bring up a really valid point here, because the base building incurs because of how not just we're implementing it, but how it's going to impact and affect everyone in the business, in the organization. It's not just IT anymore. It's all leaders, right? Security has components in every way to design and protect your control towers. And so the easiest way we've found to address and approach, OpEx, CapEx spend and finding out the cost of security as part of like an overall larger kind of construction project, right? How do we put all the pipes and lay down the foundation? It's really associating what's your cybersecurity strategy? Do you even have one? And how do those map back to your business units? What are we going to maybe depreciate, or let's say not depreciate, but deprecate? Maybe there's some tools we can get rid of that can be replaced by a much bigger platform that can do more things and kind of future-proof some of the tools that we might purchase in the future, right? So maybe we're not going to buy a SIM technology today or a VR scanner today, but maybe 7 to 8 months down the road, does it support it? So you're almost future-proofing whatever it is you're looking into purchasing. You really want to future-proof what that solution is going to look like, a year or two down the road. So you're covering all your bases, you're covering your assets. That's an important component to keep in mind when you're thinking about costs. Second, obviously, is buy-in. You have to have it not just a champion. You have to have a leader of really a fleet of champions who have the same initiative to make sure that you're training, developing, but also making sure that your teams need to be aware of these cyber threats, right? And these exposures that with one click, with one wrong move, with one hole left unopened, this is the cost you're now going to absorb from legal litigations and data reputation and brand, recognition. I mean, if things are going to go in a bigger decline. And I mean, on average, I have a slide. I don't think I have it available right now, but just from last year, 2021, I think it was 4.3 million lost in breached compromised accounts, just in breached compromised accounts, 4.3 million. And that's just a national average, right? We're not even thinking globally, but those are things to think about and bring up when you're talking about security projects, costs, plan to deploy, security audits and policies. Like, you need to really have an inventory of everything in front of you first to level set. Okay, here are the areas. These are all the things we have on the table. Here are the methods or methodologies I'm going to use to protect those particular assets. And then, of course, here's how we're going to allocate those costs. And then, of course, my people to run and maintain said tools or said platforms. But yeah, that's kind of my general consensus of how I've heard and seen things and built out my own business continuity plans and also budgetary plans as well. When I was working at my last employer, 2 employers ago, I should say, I had to figure that out. And it's a daunting task, but I think there's better ways to understand not just the security budget, but how it relates back to the business, how it's going to give us more return of investment by saving time through automation, by being able to train my junior analysts much quicker, because I already have everything documented in a knowledge base, kind of central, database. And then, of course, being able to take those workflows to automate and orchestrate a lot of the other areas that I might not be able to get to because I'm not a 24/7 robot. It's impossible. I cannot be in front of my computer 24/7. Have I done it before? Sure. Do I recommend it? No. But I think, to answer your question, I think those are some of the areas to consider when you're looking at security operations from a holistic perspective, but also future proofing what that budget will look like to make sure we're holding all business units accountable, that everyone is in line and in scope with the strategic efforts we're trying to imply here. But that security has to always be number one top thing we think about whenever we're, again, looking at any type of security type tool, access control, rule, regulation, policy, audit. We have to talk about it. And we need to understand the deep, dark secrets that are behind those entryways. Because if we don't, guess what? Someone's just going to come up to your house, walk right in, and sit right on your couch, and you won't even know about it. So we need to avoid that. And True story, real life. Had that actually happen many years ago at my old house. Someone just walked right in, door was unlocked, and that wasn't, I wouldn't say it was on me, but these things happen. It's scary. I was pretty scarred. I didn't like that. And I installed a bunch of security things and cameras and detections. Yeah. So again, it's just, this is the theme, right? It's protecting your SaaS. It's protecting your life, your identity, the company's identity, and of course, making sure that none of this information gets put into the wrong hands.
Yeah.
So probably a very long-winded answer, but thanks, Colin, for asking that.
And thank you for spending the last 50-odd-ish minutes with us, and thanks to everybody else. Steve, Chris, Brian, Andy, and those lurking that you can't see on the video because they're in listen-only mode. Many of us join webinars in listen-only mode. But yes, if they have any more questions about SaaS security, they find you on LinkedIn, I'm guessing.
Yes, LinkedIn. I'm not so good in the Slack channels lately, but I'm going to get better. So Colin's going to hold me accountable and make sure he blasts my name across every channel. So I will be better at that. I certainly need to post more into the #security channel to kind of keep everyone abreast of what's happening in the security space and in that its own ecosystem. Great question, Haram. What keeps me up at night? Lots of things. A lot of things keep me up by night. I would say the one thing that's keeping me up a lot lately is the remote code execution attacks. And I think that's very, very fitting of the Log4j issue, right? Writing that malicious script, injecting that malicious code into a website or a server source. And then guess what? Gets executed and it returns a message, just got hacked. Like, I've just got all your information. So it's an area that I'm starting to focus a lot more on. And what I'm actually doing right now myself, I've just posted on my LinkedIn 3 videos. You can check those out. 3 videos that are actually speaking towards the battle plan, the strategy, using data loss prevention tools, using MITRE ATT&CK intelligence, and also predictive intelligence with vulnerability scanners to be able to dynamically see and prevent, but also see what type of coverage you have based on these remote code execution use attack patterns, because it's a pattern. And it's a pattern that we're seeing a lot more of. And you're going to see the news is going to be flooded with a lot more. It's something that's not going to stop. I think it's going to continue to get worse and worse. And we need more cybersecurity officials and leaders in the industry to really start speaking more about the safety and the sanity of why security is so important, and why we need to have these protocols in place, because arbitrary code execution is a real thing. It gets weaponized and it takes down an entire pipeline of, right, the Colonial Pipeline. It took down the gas. I could not get gas in my monster truck, and I was a very unhappy Chris for 2 days. That was not a good time. I couldn't go to Taco Bell at 2 a.m. Didn't have gas. That's not a good time for me.
That was a difficult experience of not being able to get gas. Did allow me to justify getting roto packs for my truck so I can carry extra gasoline when we are on long road trips. But we'll have to do I think we're going to have to do some follow-up sessions on this.
Absolutely.
We're gonna run out of time, and we're gonna say stuff that we don't want to have recorded. So I will press pause here in a second. Thank you everybody again for joining. Thank you for Chris. Check out the Better IT Slack community, and also follow us on LinkedIn and all those other places, and get more news and keep up to date with what's happening.